Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
You are not worth my words. That was the first thing I said out loud when I saw her standing in the doorway at dawn. Or maybe I only thought I said it. I don't even recall if my lips moved. The anger in my chest felt like a pressure valve about to burst. There was a time I would have yelled, thrown something, made a scene. But I just stood there in the half-light, barefoot, leaning against the cold wall of the hallway, eyes fixed on her. She didn't respond, not even a twitch at the corner of her mouth. She had nothing to say in that moment. Or maybe she had everything to say, but no courage to voice it. Minutes earlier, I'd been in our bedroom. No, my bedroom. The idea that it could still be ours felt like a sick joke. I had woken to silence, except for this numb throbbing behind my temples. The night before, I'd found the letter on the coffee table. It was my own note, the one I wrote in a blaze of pain and fury. You are free. But now you are not my choice. Never. I could hardly recall writing those exact words. They poured out of me in a single unstoppable flood. Maybe that was some leftover autopilot from the old days, when I used to be a journalist and my reflex was to put words on paper so I wouldn't lose them. My memory flickers sometimes, due to the accident that nearly erased me 10 years ago. I remember certain details with perfect clarity, then blank out on basic recollections. It's worse when I'm emotionally overloaded. Right then, I was wide awake but exhausted. My body felt stiff, my left leg tingled, same old nerve damage. Through the open window, I sensed the hush of the city morning, that breathless moment before traffic starts howling. Usually, I'd find comfort in those quiet minutes, but today the silence felt suffocating. I pictured her coming home hours ago, creeping in. Did she read the letter then? Or had she seen it earlier? I stepped out into the hall, and there she was, my wife. Rebecca, the woman with whom I'd shared so many nights and illusions. She wore a robe pulled tight around her waist, hair undone. I could see the faint imprint of a brand name across her chest, like men's pajamas used to have. My heart lurched at the memory of what I found in her suitcase days ago. An old pair of pajamas with a name scrawled in marker, to my love. Not my handwriting. Not even close. She opened her mouth slightly, but no words came. She looked at me as if she wanted me to shout, to point a finger, to confront her with righteous anger, maybe so she could lash back or make excuses. But I stood there, face rigid, voice calm in a dangerous way. We stayed like that, locked in an unspoken standoff, until I finally stepped around her, not wanting to brush her arm. My daughter's room was at the end of the corridor. I forced myself to move quietly so as not to wake the kid. She'd gone through enough. I heard Rebecca's voice behind me, a whisper, "Michael." But I didn't stop, didn't turn. I went straight to the balcony. The air was still. It clung to my skin, thick like a warning before a thunderstorm. I placed both hands on the rail, looked out over the sleeping neighborhood. My body tensed, but I breathed, controlling it. I could not let rage devour me. I'd done that before, once, in those early days of recovery, when my memory was a miserable patchwork. Anger led nowhere. If anything, it fueled more chaos. In the distance, a dog barked. A car engine revved up. Sound invaded the new day. But I felt like I was behind glass, hearing everything from afar. Slowly, I heard footsteps behind me. She approached, but stayed a few feet away, as if knowing that crossing some invisible line would set me off. I tightened my grip on the railing. "Last night," I said. "Were you with him again?" She breathed in, shallow, anxious. "Michael." I squeezed my eyes shut. "I'm not looking for an explanation. I just want to know." Silence. Then a barely audible yes. I nodded slowly, eyes still closed. I could feel my heart pound in my temples, that old wound in my skull thrumming. A swirl of images rushed me, unpleasant fragments. A crash, a hospital bed, blank faces I should have recognized. Then the memory of me stumbling months later, trying to remember my daughter's middle name. And at some point, the suspicion that Rebecca had stepped out of our life together, found someone else while I was busy learning how to walk again, how to talk without stuttering. I let out a ragged breath. "Go inside," I said. "I'll come back in soon. We still have to talk." She retreated. For a moment, I thought she might protest or cling to me with useless apologies. But she just left me alone. The early sun rose, smearing the sky in a dull pink. The city below awakened, though I barely saw it. In my mind, I replayed that moment from days ago, when I'd rummaged in the closet for a spare blanket. Her suitcase lay half open under some clothes. And there it was, a well-worn pajama top with "To My Love" in thick black letters. Someone else's handwriting. A man's scrawl. I'd recognized it as something she wore occasionally, thinking it was just some old lounge shirt. But now, the truth pinned me like a blade in the gut. It explained why she wore it with such casual comfort. A keepsake from him. And I realized I'd probably seen it 100 times, but never read the words. Or maybe I did see them, and forgot. My memory was fragile anyway, right? Maybe that was her excuse for all this. He forgets. He doesn't notice. A convenient cover for a betrayal that had begun quietly, slowly, until it overtook every corner of our marriage. And yet, I felt strangely calm on the balcony. The guilt that churned inside me, this sense that maybe I hadn't been there for her, that maybe I'd driven her away, was overshadowed by the primal, male anger in my chest. But I wouldn't show her that. Not fully. I needed to see him, to confront his face in my mind. John. John R. She mentioned his name a few times in passing over the last year. Some new business contact, a local manager she teamed up with for a social media project. But I barely paid attention. My therapy sessions, my attempts to piece together the jigsaw of my life, overshadowed everything else. Meanwhile, John was stepping into my place without me noticing. I turned from the railing. Time to get in there, face the day. My daughter was stirring, and I heard a quiet shuffle in the kitchen. I walked through the living room, inhaling that stale air of disillusion. The letter I'd written was there on the table, a single piece of paper with my scrawling script. "You are free. But you're not my choice now." Never. Rebecca was by the sink, eyes rimmed red, but no tears. She was making coffee. A silent, mechanical gesture, as if she wanted to anchor herself in something normal. For a moment, I pictured how many mornings like this we'd shared. She used to greet me with a gentle, "Hey, sleepyhead," or some playful smile. Now, we were on different planets. I walked up, standing opposite her. She opened a cupboard, took out 2 mugs. "You want some?" she asked. Her voice quavered. "Sure," I answered coldly. She poured 2 cups, slid one toward me. I let it sit there, the steam swirling. We didn't speak. Then my daughter called from her bedroom. I set my jaw. This was the last normal morning routine we'd have, but she couldn't see the cracks yet. "Not like this." "I'll go talk to her," Rebecca murmured. "Then maybe we can figure out what to do." I wanted to say something. Maybe a cutting remark about how she lost the right to use "we," or how she was still wearing that same robe I used to touch, used to take off her shoulders on nights we were close. But my mouth stayed shut. I just gave a small nod and let her go. As she disappeared, I sipped the coffee. My throat felt raw. A part of me was screaming, "End this. End it now. Kick her out. Show her. Make her feel everything she's forced me to endure." Another part remembered the old blame game. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe the coma, the rehab, the mood swings, the financial instability. Maybe that all turned me into someone she couldn't love anymore. The guilt gnawed at me. But then I saw the pajama top in my head again, and the anger flared. She had chosen to betray me. Period. I placed the mug down, made a decision. I'd do what I must, but I wouldn't be the incompetent, half-broken man she remembered. I'd talk. I'd lay it out. Then we'd see what remained. When my daughter finally came into the kitchen, I mustered a tight smile, gave her a one-armed hug. She looked up at me, confusion in her eyes. Something was off. She could feel the tension. She's a teenager now, old enough to sense cracks in the air. "Dad, are you okay? You look tired." "I'm just not sleeping well," I said, ruffling her hair. "No worries." She stood there a moment, as if expecting more. But I couldn't offer anything else. She shrugged in that teenage way, rummaged for cereal, and cast me another glance. Her fingers trembled slightly. I noticed that. She always twitched her hands when anxious. Rebecca stepped back into the room, silently helping our daughter with breakfast. No one spoke. The tension was so thick, I was surprised it didn't shatter our glasses. Eventually, I mumbled some excuse about needing fresh air and left them. I went to my office, though office was too grand a word. It was a small, cramped room stacked with notebooks, old manuscripts, photos from my days as a journalist. The place I'd retreated to every time I tried to rewire my brain after the accident. I sat heavily in the old swivel chair, stared at the keyboard. My reflection wavered in the blank monitor screen. 30 seconds passed, maybe a minute. My hands clenched into fists. Then it hit me again. The memory of that dream, or was it a memory? A sense of her standing in front of me with a strange man, introducing him as if I should welcome him. My daughter behind her, uncertain, trembling. And that moment, like a slow-motion scene in a film, when I realized who he was. John, my replacement, the father she found for our daughter when I was lying half dead in a hospital bed. The question hammered in my skull. How long had she lived this double life? I closed my eyes, pressing my palms to them. The guilt welled up like acid in my throat. Maybe she needed someone stable, not a broken man who forgot birthdays and walked with a limp. But that didn't excuse the betrayal. I took a deep breath, forced the thoughts aside. I needed to see him, that was clear. I had to watch him squirm, or maybe not squirm at all. Maybe stand tall with that confident stance he probably had. I didn't want to fight, didn't want a dramatic brawl in the street, but I wanted answers, like a man. Soon enough, the day fell into a gray lull. My daughter headed out to school. Rebecca stayed locked in the bedroom, maybe packing, or maybe just sitting on the bed in a daze. I grabbed my jacket, left the house, and headed to a local cafe. My contact was a friend of mine from the old times, a freelance photographer who once told me she'd seen Rebecca with a man, looking cozy. That was the first real suspicion I got, months ago. I'd brushed it off then, calling it nonsense. I was too tired to investigate. Now, I wanted details. I reached the cafe and sank into a booth by the window. Sat there for half an hour, swirling a cup of black coffee. My friend arrived, hesitant, her eyes scanning my face for clues. I must have looked rough because her eyebrows knit together in concern. "You found out, didn't you?" she said quietly. I nodded. She lowered herself opposite me, fiddling with her phone. "I'm sorry, Michael. You know I didn't want to cause trouble. I just thought you deserved to know." "It's okay," I said, my voice calm. "I need to hear everything. And I need to know about him." She hasn't told me much. He's some business guy, John R. or something. Tall, good-looking, I guess. They met for drinks in a fancy hotel lounge downtown. At least that's where I saw them. That was half a year ago. She bit her lip. "It looked more than just casual, you know." I swallowed. "And you've seen them since?" She nodded. "Twice. Once I saw them leaving a restaurant together. Definitely intimate. Another time, I spotted them at some open-air festival, but they were with other people, possibly coworkers. Hard to be sure." I exhaled, a slow hiss, so it was longer than I feared. My friend reached across the table, squeezed my hand gently. I thanked her, asked her not to say a word to anyone. Then I left, mind spinning. The city seemed abnormally bright, the sky too blue. My nerves buzzed. It took me another hour to track John R. down. A name, a phone number, an office location. He worked for some logistics company. My breath felt short, imagining how many times they must have arranged secret meetings, how often my wife had lied about late work calls. In front of a tall glass building, I paused, looking at my reflection in the doors. Pale, lean face, a slight sag around my eyes, hair looking more grayed than I remembered. I tested my left knee. Still a dull ache, but stable. A doorman inside approached. I waved him off politely, took an elevator to the 14th floor. The corridors smelled like carpet cleaner and printer ink. People in suits breezed by, each with their own agenda. Finally, I found the nameplate. Jonathan John R.R. It must have been R. Randolph. I stepped into an open reception area. A woman at the desk asked if I had an appointment. I gave her my calm, rehearsed line. I'm an old acquaintance. I just need 5 minutes of his time. She made a call, listened, then pointed me down the hall. His office door stood ajar. I knocked, my heart thrumming, and heard a deep voice. Come in. I walked in. He was behind a sleek wooden desk, leaning back in his chair, tall, indeed, broad shoulders, short, well-styled hair. He wore an expensive watch that glinted in the overhead light. Must have cost more than my last freelance contract. He raised an eyebrow at me, clearly not recognizing me. Can I help you? His tone was polite, but with that corporate edge that says he has no time for nonsense. I closed the door softly. My pulse hammered, but I kept my posture. My name is Michael. I paused. Michael Clark. He tapped a pen on the desk. Okay. Are you from the marketing team or? You know my wife. I cut him off, voice unwavering. Rebecca Clark. That made him stop, pen freezing mid-tap. His expression flickered. Then he forced a slight smirk, as if to maintain control. Look, he said, inhaling sharply. I'm not sure what you. I'm not here to cause a scene, I said quietly, stepping forward, arms at my sides, tension flooding them. I just need to see the man who slept with my wife. I want to see him in his environment, and I want to watch his face when I say, I know everything. He took a moment, lips thinning. I could almost read the script in his head. He's used to managing crises. He's likely done this dance before. He put the pen down, got up slowly, as if considering whether to keep the desk between us. All right, he said. I gather we have a complicated situation. This isn't the place. Let's go somewhere private. I resisted an urge to laugh. I'm not sure you understand. We have nothing to discuss about your relationship with my wife. That's already a done deal. What I want is to stand here and see if you'll own up to being the man who's destroyed a family, or if you'll pretend you're a victim too. I just want to see your reaction, because I've got a daughter at home who thinks the world is about to fall apart. His jaw tightened. He took a step around the desk. For a second, it looked like he might lash out, or try to dominate me physically. Then he stopped, as if deciding that wouldn't help. He spoke through clenched teeth. I didn't force anything on her. It just happened. We care about each other. And from what I understand, you were hardly present in her life for a long time. My chest tightened. The guilt I carried turned white-hot. But I glared at him, refusing to break eye contact. You can tell yourself any story you want, I said. You can paint me as the absent husband. Doesn't change the fact that you're a coward who sneaks around. He breathed heavily, but held his ground. I'm sorry for the pain this is causing you. But you need to realize, sometimes marriages die, and people find something new. It's not always about you. A swirl of conflicting emotions whipped through me. Part of me wanted to slam him against the wall. But I reined it in. This was a man used to controlling situations. I wouldn't give him an excuse to call security or worse, paint me as the unhinged spouse. I took a slow breath, then nodded once. That's all I needed. Your face, your voice. Now I know. Good luck living with yourself. I turned, left his office. Didn't bother slamming the door. My heart hammered so loud I heard it in my ears. Outside, I sucked in a lungful of corridor air. The receptionist gave me a curious look, but I just strode past. The drive back home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel. My mind reeled. I confronted him, but it didn't give me closure. Anger churned, a low-grade burn in my gut. I wanted to see him cower, or at least show some regret, but he was arrogant enough to hold his own. Maybe that was what Rebecca saw in him: confidence, success, a man not weighed down by memory lapses or scars. When I got home, the house was quiet. My daughter was still at school. Rebecca was in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch, the letter I wrote to her clutched in her hands. Her face was ghost white. I stood in the doorway, silent, watching her shoulders rise and fall. She noticed me and set the letter aside. Her eyes searched mine. She looked like she wanted to speak. I stepped forward, my posture rigid, and said, "You found someone to fill the space I left, right? While I was half dead, you carried on with your life. I suppose I understand that. But we're going to talk about how this ends." She bowed her head, rubbed her temples. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" I cut her off. "I know everything. I know about John. I know you've been with him for months. Longer, probably. You said it yourself this morning. Don't insult me by spinning a sob story." She swallowed hard. For a moment, I saw tears well up, but she blinked them away. Yes, she finally said. "We got close. I was lonely, Michael. You were distant, so wrapped up in your own pain. I tried to reach you, but it felt like I lost you somewhere between your surgeries and your depression. And John, he was there. He listened." My nostrils flared. "So I guess that justifies it all, right? I got injured, so you get to find a new man. Keep him on the side, until I'm well enough to notice." She inhaled shakily. "You were never truly well again, were you? Even now, you're a shell of who you used to be. I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because that's how it is. We lost our spark. Then time passed, and we drifted so far apart, I barely recognized you. I felt my fists clench. I forced them open. And did you ever consider talking to me about it, or leaving me if you were so unhappy, instead of sneaking around?" She didn't answer. Her silence was all I needed to hear. Something inside me snapped. I remembered that dreamlike moment, her introducing my daughter to a couple of half-siblings, a twisted fantasy that maybe John fathered other kids, and she was bringing them all together. Or maybe it was my subconscious cooking up worst-case scenarios. I inhaled, exhaled slowly. "Well, it's done now," I said in a low, controlled voice. "I wrote you that letter. I meant every word. You're free to do what you want. Live with John, or run away, whatever. But you're not my choice. Ever again." She pressed her lips together. Her eyes flicked to a photo of the three of us. Me, her, and our daughter at a park. A simpler time. "What about our child?" she said, voice trembling. "Are you just leaving? Am I the one leaving?" I stared at her. My mind raced. Of course I wanted to keep our daughter safe. I wanted her to have the stability I never truly regained. "That's the only reason I'm still standing here in front of you," I muttered. "We figure that out. Because I won't let you tear her life apart. She's already suspicious. I don't want her to see me throwing you out on the street, but if that's what it takes to keep her from the confusion of your double life, I'll do it." She shook her head, tears finally slipping free. "You don't have to do that. I'll pack. I'll find somewhere else. Maybe I'll stay with a friend for now. We'll come up with a custody arrangement, if that's what you want." We locked eyes, the air sizzling with years of unspoken regrets. But we both knew we crossed a line of no return. Then came a knock on the front door. I jerked my gaze toward the sound. She tensed, color draining from her face. It was probably him, John. I saw it in her eyes. She didn't confirm it, but the spark of panic told me everything. I couldn't believe the gall, showing up here. unless she'd asked him to come. She moved to stand, but I raised a hand, stepped forward. I opened the door. Sure enough, there he was in the afternoon sunlight, tall in a suit, jaw set. Our eyes met. His flicked past me, searching for her. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me, so she wouldn't have to come face to face with him under my roof. "What do you want?" I said bluntly. "I came to see if she's okay." She texted me. "She's fine." I growled softly. "And you can go." He looked like he wanted to protest, but then his gaze flicked to my posture, my clenched jaw. A subtle wave of caution crossed his face. I felt an ugly heat swirling in my gut. My mind flashed to violent impulses. I wanted to hit him, physically mark him for what he'd done, but I controlled it. I pictured my daughter's face, how she'd see me if I stooped to brutality. "You think you're the hero in this story," I said quietly. "You're not. Get away from this house. Don't come back." He hesitated, squared his shoulders like a man who rarely backs down. For a moment, I thought we might spiral into a fight. Then he exhaled, shot a glance at the closed door, and turned away. I watched him walk down the path to his car, every step brimming with tension. He didn't slam the door, didn't peel out in a fury. He just left. I stayed on the porch, breathing heavily, heart pounding so loud it rang in my ears. Finally, I re-entered the house. Rebecca was in the living room, hugging herself, tears running. I felt no mercy. Not now. She looked up, and for once, no words passed between us. She stood, walked down the hall toward the bedroom. Night fell. The day had been a slow burn of resentment, short bursts of confrontation, then stretches of silence. I half expected John to come back, or my daughter to ask direct questions, but none of that happened. My daughter retreated to her room after school, earphones on, oblivious to the adult war zone. Rebecca avoided me. I avoided her. Around midnight, I sat at my desk again, tapping my pen, the only light coming from a small lamp. Memories flickered. A hospital corridor, me in a wheelchair, her face full of forced cheer. Then she'd disappear for hours or days, calling me occasionally with updates. I used to blame myself for not being good enough, not healing fast enough. But maybe she was with him even then. The timeline was murky. I wrote another note. I didn't want to speak it out loud, so I let the pen do the work. Words poured out in a short burst. "I remember enough to know what you did. I remember enough to see your lies. But I don't remember loving you anymore." I read it over. It felt raw, but honest. I folded the paper, slipped it into an envelope, scrawled her name on it. Then I stared at it, the same creeping sensation of guilt in my gut. Did I truly not love her, or was I punishing her? Was I burying the part of me that once adored her, simply because I couldn't handle the betrayal? I closed my eyes. The anger in me was no longer a roaring flame. It was a slow, smoldering coal that refused to go out. I set the note aside, stood up, and decided to get some sleep. As I passed the bedroom, the door was ajar. I glanced inside. Rebecca was lying on the bed, still dressed, curled on her side, hair strewn across the pillow. Her shoulders shook. She wasn't making a sound. Silent crying. Her phone lay on the nightstand. No doubt she'd been texting him. The sight of her tears triggered a momentary ache in my chest. This was the mother of my child, the woman I once cherished. I remembered the day she gave birth, how I held her hand in awe. I remembered how we used to laugh at our inside jokes. I wanted to step forward and comfort her. But the pajama top with that marker scrawl flared in my mind. My sympathy hardened. I slipped away. The next morning, I rose early, made coffee in the silence. My daughter left for school under a cloud of tension. Rebecca lingered near the kitchen counter. She had a small suitcase packed, set by the door. She avoided my gaze. "Where are you going?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, eyes down. "I told you. I'll stay with a friend for a while. I need time to figure out what I'm doing." She paused. I want to talk to our daughter, though. Explain some of it. When the time is right. I let out a short, harsh laugh. Good luck explaining your betrayal in a way that won't traumatize her. She flinched. Please, don't make this uglier than it has to be. I said nothing, turning away, swallowing the bitterness. She sighed, picked up her suitcase, and walked out. The door clicked shut. I stood there a while, absorbing the emptiness. Then, as though possessed, I grabbed my keys and followed her outside. She was heading to her car, shoulders hunched, eyes on the pavement. Before she got in, I stepped up. She looked at me in surprise. I might have startled her. My expression was hollow cold. Wait, I said. She clutched the suitcase handle, uncertain. I took a few steps closer, lowered my voice so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I need you to leave the keys to the house, I told her. I want to decide how and when you get to come back. For our daughter's sake, we'll work out visits. But for now, I need control of that door. Her eyes flickered with a spark of hurt pride. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out the house keys. She pressed them into my open palm. Fine. She paused like she wanted to say something else. But I turned away. I stared at the sidewalk, letting her see my tension. Then I heard the car door slam, the engine start, and she was gone. Time stretched in a slow, agonizing sequence of days. I arranged a meeting with a lawyer, just to know my options. Meanwhile, I juggled phone calls to my parents, who wanted updates, and avoided telling them the truth. My daughter sensed the shift. She drifted around the house like a ghost, always anxious, eyes flicking to me in silent pleas for reassurance. I tried to hold it together for her, cooked dinners, forced a semblance of normalcy. But I was a frayed wire, prone to short sparks of anger. On the second night after Rebecca left, I found an old men's t-shirt crumpled in the hamper. The marker scrawl, "To my love," that damned piece of clothing. I stared at it for a long minute. Then I took it out to the backyard and stuffed it into the metal fire pit we rarely used. My heart hammered. I reached for the lighter. A flame burst, and I watched the cloth blacken, shrivel, turn to ash. As it burned, my chest felt heavy, but also a savage satisfaction coursed through me. The next morning, the tension in the air was thicker, heavier. I was in the kitchen, flipping through bills. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "We need to talk about telling our daughter the truth. I'll come by at 7 p.m., I typed back. Fine. Short. Dismissive. Part of me dreaded it, the confrontation that would inevitably happen. Part of me wanted it done. I needed a final, decisive end to this. At 6:55, I heard the familiar hum of her car. My daughter was in her room, so I quickly walked there, tapped on the door, told her to wait until I called her. She nodded, confusion in her eyes again, but obeyed. Then I went to let Rebecca in. She looked drawn, tense, wearing jeans and a plain sweater. Her hair was pinned back. She kept glancing around as if the walls might collapse. We walked into the living room. The only light came from a floor lamp in the corner, casting half our faces in shadow. I motioned for her to sit. She perched on the couch, and I sat in the armchair opposite her. We said nothing for a moment. Then she cleared her throat. "I'm going to tell her we're separating. But I won't mention John. Not yet. I don't want her to see it as some soap opera affair. She's too young to understand that her mother decided to have a fling with a man from work." I said, voice calm but razor edge. "She's not a toddler, Rebecca. She'll figure it out eventually, or find the evidence on your phone, or hear rumors. Don't patronize her." She pressed her lips together. "Maybe eventually I'll tell her, but not now. This is going to be hard enough for her." I nodded slowly. "Fine. Let's just tell her we can't continue as husband and wife. We have issues we can't fix, but we both still love her." Rebecca exhaled, shoulders slumping in relief. "Okay, let's do that." I called my daughter in. She came, eyes wide, scanning both of us. I felt my throat go dry, but forced words out, controlling my emotion. I told her in a calm, measured tone that her mother and I were having serious problems. We decided it was best to live apart. Rebecca nodded, interjecting small reassurances. Our daughter's lips trembled. She asked if it was her fault. I nearly broke then, my heart twisting, but I held it together, insisted it was not her fault. We loved her more than anything in the world. When she asked if we ever fix it, I looked at Rebecca. She lowered her head, blinked, then whispered, "We don't know. But right now, we have to do this." Tears streaked my daughter's cheeks. She turned, ran to her room. I wanted to follow, to comfort her, but I also felt like my presence might only magnify the tension. Rebecca and I sat there in silence. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. "Why didn't you cry earlier, when you were with him?" I muttered bitterly. "That's when you should have felt guilty." She raised her head, eyes red. I did feel guilty. It didn't stop me, though. That admission hung in the air. Part of me wanted to lash out, but I just nodded. I'd expected as much. Finally, she stood up, looked around the living room, her gaze lingering on photos, on the little personal touches that once made this our home. She turned to me. "I'll come back tomorrow to pick up more clothes. Is that okay?" "Sure," I said, standing as well. I walked her to the door, parted ways with a curt nod. She left, the echo of the door closing behind her. I rubbed my eyes. My daughter was sobbing in her room. That haunting sound gutted me. I marched into the hallway, paused at her door, took a breath, and opened it. She was curled on the bed, face buried in her pillow. I sat beside her, placed a tentative hand on her back. She sniffled. "Daddy, why do you both sound so angry?" "What really happened?" My lips parted. For a split second, I wrestled with the truth. But no, I couldn't do it. She was still a child in so many ways, despite her teenage cynicism. We just grew apart. I managed. "It's not about you. Never blame yourself." She nodded shakily. I stroked her hair until she quieted. Then I remembered the exhaustion. This day had been so long, I felt I'd lived a month. In the days that followed, Rebecca came and went, gathering her belongings. We barely spoke beyond the logistics. I felt like a statue, my anger compressed into a bullet lodged in my heart. My friend from the cafe texted me once in a while, asking if I was okay. I gave short answers. My father called, concerned that I sounded distant. I brushed him off. I still had this sense that something was unresolved. I remembered the letter I wrote, how I ended it with "never," but I'd never delivered that final blow to her face. One evening, I rummaged in my desk drawer, found the letter again. I reread it. "You are free. But now you are not my choice. Never." That last word clanged in my mind like a funeral bell. Eventually, I decided to set it on the kitchen table for her to see next time she came over. Sure enough, the next morning, she showed up to grab more boxes. I was outside on the porch, letting her do it alone, when I heard a strangled sound from the kitchen. I went in and found her with the letter in her hands, lips parted. She read it slowly. Then she set it down, stared at me. "You've recovered your memory enough to remember how you used to be," she said in a low voice, tears threatening again. "And that's the man who wrote this, the man who never forgives. Isn't that right?" My chest felt tight, a swirl of conflicting emotions. "I don't remember everything," I said, voice edged with bitterness. "But I remember enough." She swallowed. "Then let me ask you, do you remember the times you pushed me away after your accident? The times you refused to let me help you in therapy? The times you locked yourself in this office for days because you were terrified of me seeing you struggle? I tried to be there, but you shut me out." I closed my eyes. "Don't turn this into my fault." She pressed her lips together. "I'm not. But at least know that I'm sorry. For everything. I never wanted to break this family. It happened, and I realize that's no excuse. But it's all I have." I stood there, trembling in a silent rage. Then I stepped forward, took the letter from her, placed it back on the table. My voice came out cold. "Get your things. Then go. We're done." She nodded, tears slipping down. She gathered the last of her boxes, carried them out. I followed her to the door, watched her load them into her trunk. She turned to me, a silent question in her eyes. I said nothing. She drove off, dust swirling. After that, nights settled into a pattern. I'd slump into bed around midnight, mind churning. Sometimes nightmares came, fragments of the hospital, the beep of machines, her distant silhouette. Occasionally, I dreamt of her and John together, though my mind conjured it hazily. I'd wake with my pulse racing, drenched in sweat. Then I'd force the memory aside and focus on my daughter. She was all that mattered now. One night, a storm rolled in. Wind rattled the windows. I stood on the balcony, letting the humid air cling to my skin. No illusions, no fantasies, just the raw truth. My wife left me for a man who gave her the attention and stability I couldn't. She was sorry, but the damage was done. And I realized that, deep down, I felt a twisted guilt, as if I somehow failed her. But it was overshadowed by my need to protect myself, protect my daughter. That quiet self-hatred coiled in my gut. Not every wound is visible, but it eats you from the inside. Lightning flashed. Rain hammered the roof. I recalled the day I learned to walk again, leaning on crutches. She was there, cheering softly. Did she already have doubts about me then? Had she considered leaving? I'd never know. Another flash of lightning. I whispered, "You are the past," though there was no one to hear. The tension in my chest eased a fraction, like exhaling toxins. Days flowed into weeks. I met with lawyers, hammered out the details of separation. We explained a partial custody arrangement to our daughter, who took it with heartbreak, but tried to stay brave. Rebecca moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. I sometimes glimpsed John's name on her phone if I walked by. My daughter noticed that once, and shot me a worried glance, but I pretended not to see. Every so often, Rebecca and I had minimal phone contact about finances or our daughter's school events. She rarely brought John up. I never asked. I focused on writing again, channeling my fury and regret into stories I pitched to small magazines. They sometimes got accepted, giving me enough money to pay the bills. Finally came the day that I decided to say everything I bottled up. A day of scorching heat, the sun beating down on the sidewalk. She arrived at the house to pick up our daughter for a weekend. John was waiting in his car at the curb, engine running. Typical. I stood on the porch as my daughter dashed past me, a forced smile on her face. She hopped into the car. Rebecca lingered, hugging her arms. I walked down the porch steps, motioned for her to meet me on the driveway, out of earshot from our child. She complied, eyes wary. The heat shimmered on the asphalt. "I just want you to know," I said, voice tight. "I remember enough. Enough to know I loved you once, more than anything. And I don't regret that. But I can't forgive what you did. You want to live your new life. That's fine. But never think I'll be your fallback. This door is closed now." She gazed at me, eyes shiny with tears she wouldn't let fall. Then she gave a small, resigned nod. "I understand." I crossed my arms. "Take care of our daughter this weekend. Don't drag her into your relationship with him." She bit her lip, nodded again. "I'm trying not to, Michael. You have to trust that I love her too." I let out a breath, turned away. "Go on." She backed away, slid into the passenger seat of John's car. He didn't look at me, eyes on the road. My daughter waved from the back seat, a tense little wave that nearly broke my heart. Then they were gone. I stood there, letting the haze of mid-afternoon envelop me. My shirt clung to my back. My fists slowly unclenched. In that moment, I felt an odd sense of finality, like I'd done everything possible to set the boundaries. No matter what the future held, I wouldn't be that fragile man who sank into depression, letting the world trample them. I climbed the porch steps, stepped inside. The quiet pressed in, but it felt different now. Less suffocating, more just, emptiness with potential. A blank canvas. I sank onto the living room couch, glancing at my phone. I could call a friend, maybe get out for a while. Or I could open my laptop, start writing again. The numbness in my chest lingered, but it coexisted with a spark of clarity. In that hush, my mind drifted to the phrase I scribbled under the letter. You are the past. I'd never told her that out loud, but it summarized everything. She was free, yes, but the cost was us. I was no saint, I knew that. My guilt still felt heavy as lead sometimes, but I also knew we'd reached a point of no return. It was time to let the storm settle. The day crawled on. Around dusk, I rose and wandered the house, noticing the small remnants of her presence. Some leftover perfume, a hair clip on the vanity, a photo album. I gathered those items, put them in a box, sealed it, wrote her name on it. Maybe I'd mail it to her or hand it over next time. For now, it was out of sight, out of mind. Then, unexpectedly, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror on the wall. I saw the tight lines in my face, the slight limp as I shifted my weight off my bad leg. I saw a quiet rage and sorrow swirling in my eyes, along with something else, a grim determination, perhaps. Because this wasn't the end of me. I survived a coma once. I'd survived betrayal, too. I stared at my reflection, let out a breath. You are not worth my words, I whispered again, though this time it felt less directed at her and more like an exorcism of everything that had haunted me. Then I walked away. She came back with our daughter Sunday evening, dropping her off at the curb. I watched from the window, saw them exchange a brief hug. Our daughter ran up the walkway, eyes on me. I opened the door. She stepped in, backpack slung over one shoulder. I noticed how tense she looked. She said, "Mom told me about her new place." I saw it. It's small, but kinda nice. A pause, then. Dad, I miss how things used to be. I felt a stab in my chest. So do I admitted. We stood there, uncertain. Finally, I guided her into the living room, asked if she wanted to watch something together, or maybe just talk. She hesitated, then nodded. We ended up ordering pizza, flipping through channels, not paying attention to anything. She fell asleep on the couch around 10. I carried her to her bed, ignoring the dull throb in my leg. When I tucked her in, I realized she was the only reason I still believed in love at all. She was the anchor I needed to keep steady. And so the pattern established itself. On weekdays, our daughter was mostly with me. On weekends, she split time with her mother. I kept hearing about John in small, fleeting references, my daughter calling him Mum's friend. Each mention was like a little dagger, but I tried to remain stoic. That slow, controlled anger was still inside me, but it had become a companion, a quiet driving force to keep me on track. Eventually, I penned an article about betrayal and memory for a men's magazine. It poured out of me in a night, raw and personal, though I never mentioned names. I got a decent payment. The editor said it resonated with older men who'd faced heartbreak or confusion in their relationships. That gave me a strange sense of validation. One late evening, I found myself rereading that old note, "You're free, but now you're not my choice." Never. I realized it wasn't just about her. It was about every piece of me that wanted to cling to the past, to illusions. I was severing those illusions. She belonged to a different chapter, a different me. Weeks melted into months. Each day had its own pangs of sadness and flickers of hope. I never once apologized for my coldness toward her. I never once begged her to come back or asked for an explanation. I gave her exactly what I promised in the letter. Freedom, but zero chance of reconciliation. Sometimes I'd overhear my daughter on the phone with her mother, sense the tension, the heartbreak. I'd offer comfort, but I tried not to pry. This was a wound that time would have to heal, if it ever truly could. The guilt I felt about not being enough for my wife still gnawed at me, but I refused to let it overshadow my life. My therapist once told me, we can't control what others do, only how we react. So, I reacted by forging a new path. In a final gesture of closure, I arranged a quiet meeting with my lawyer and had separation papers drawn up. I included a plan for full divorce if either of us decided to finalize it. Then I handed the documents to Rebecca one afternoon, saying, "Sign whenever you're ready. I'm not rushing, but it's coming eventually." She looked at me with eyes full of regret, nodded, and took the papers. No more protests. She knew the line was drawn. That same day, I walked out on the balcony barefoot, as I had on that morning when the storm threatened. The sky was clear this time, sun about to set. I stared at the horizon, the fading light turning the clouds gold. I remembered how I used to love the hush of dawn. Now I found myself drawn to twilight, that in-between state of day and night, full of possibility and uncertainty. I leaned on the railing, let my mind settle. My body was tired, but my spirit felt resolute. If she wanted to chase her new life with John, so be it. If she wanted to regret or attempt to come back, that door was closed. I'd made my choice. Vengeance wasn't about hurting her in some dramatic showdown. My vengeance was simpler, quieter, living on my own terms with my daughter, refusing to let the betrayal define me or break me further. A soft wind stirred, brushing my face. For a second, I heard a distant echo of her voice. "You were never truly well again, were you?" Maybe that was true. Maybe I'd never be the same man I was before the accident. But that man was gone, for better or worse. My new self had scars, a limp, a scrambled memory, and a well of pain. And yet, I was still here, forging forward. The sun dipped lower, and I closed my eyes, murmuring, "You are the past." I imagined her face fading into that crimson glow on the horizon. Then I turned, walked back inside, and softly shut the balcony door behind me.